In the entrepreneurial population, you will find a higher incidence of narcissistic traits, of psychopathic traits, also in criminals, as you say, but also higher incidence of ADHD. For all of those traits, when they have a certain intensity, and they lead to all sorts of problems.
Entrepreneurs all share one common trait. But what if that superpower for driving success leads to the downfall of a business leader and maybe their entire organization? And how do you spot the signs early to prevent it from happening? Joining me today on All About Business is Jan Gerber. He's the CEO of Paracelsus Recovery, the world's most private and discreet addiction and mental health clinic. In this conversation, we'll reveal what that shared trait is, how the mental health of business leaders in the public eye can impact an organization, and how Jan has cemented his clinic as number one for the super rich and famous.
We realized there is a need, purely from an entrepreneurial perspective. We were one of the first mental health providers in the world that looked also into physical health, into functional health, into gut health, hormone levels, because that all plays a role as well in emotional resilience and well-being. People have been neglected emotionally as kids, go out into the world to prove their worth to the world, but actually in the end to themselves. That can lead to tremendous success. I think really a crucial and helpful and important way to go about it is mandatory mental health checks.
But hang on, you just said mandatory mental health checks.
Yeah.
I mean, what's that involve?
Welcome to All About Business with me, James Reed, the podcast that covers everything about business, management, and leadership. Every episode, I sit down with different guests who have bootstrapped companies, masterminded investment models, or built a business empire. They're leaders in their field, and they're here to give you top insights and actionable advice so that you can apply their ideas to your own career or business venture.
So I'm really pleased to welcome today to our All About Business studio, which has been revamped, you might notice if you're watching, Jan Gerber, who's come all the way from Switzerland, Zurich in Switzerland. So thank you, Jan, for coming. Jan is the founder of more than 20 companies, so serial entrepreneur, but his particular focus is the mental health of business people and entrepreneurs. And he has his business, Paracelsus, that focuses specifically on that and supports people who need help. So Jan, my first question is around the entrepreneurial mind. I love that idea, the entrepreneurial mind. Mm-hmm. And you work with entrepreneurs and executives, supporting them with their mental health. What's the most common issue that people seek your help for?
Right, that's actually not a straightforward answer. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a
pleasure.
real pleasure being here,
Coming.
James. Nice to meet you.
Oh.
It's normally complex and messy. So obviously we know, kind of from the public narrative, burnout is an issue. Lots of stress kind of leads to that. Often there is depression, anxiety that plays a role. But then more often than not, affected individuals, they start self-medicating, either with prescription medication. Often, kind of sleep goes first. Often then with alcohol or even illicit drugs just to function. So there is often a layer of substance use issues on top of that. So there's no one kind of main thing why entrepreneurs or business leaders seek our help.
But you cover all those bases.
Absolutely.
If you like.
All the way to personality disorders.
So why don't we take them one at a time? I mean, you've given sort of three big areas of concern there. I mean, the first, burnout. I mean, how does someone recognize that in themselves or think that this might be a problem? And how does it sort of come to light? If you how does it become an issue? Where does it start, and how does it grow?
Early symptoms often is sleep goes first. So, and it's normal as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, that you do have sleepless nights during the more stressful phases, transaction, economic downturn, whatever. But if there is a pattern, a kind of a downhill pattern, often that's one of the early symptoms. Other things can be just increased irritability, again reliance on substance, brain fog, anxiety that creeps in that were not there before or not that prevalent before. Anxiety is normal for entrepreneurs as well, right? But so you need to, in relation, if that gets worse, then you probably on a kind of a sliding scale towards.
So sleep loss. I mean, I know personally, I'm often awake at 3:00 in the morning, 3 to 4. And when I talk to other entrepreneurs, people go, oh yeah, I'm often awake then as well. Give me a call. People say, make light of it.
Yep.
But that is a sort of typical time when you might wake up and think about something. And it might be something that's causing you anxiety, or it might just be an idea. I
Absolutely.
find myself sort of doing that in the middle of the night quite frequently. But
I always say something's a problem when it becomes a problem. Right? Being awake at 3 a.m, if that's your most productive phase, if you don't need a lot of sleep, that's all fine. But if you normally sleep from, let's say, 10 or 11 p.m. until 3 a.m, and then, have a few hours of productive time, then sleep another hour or two. And then suddenly it's down to the 4 hours, or even the falling asleep gets harder because your mind is racing and you're worried about stuff. So it's the quality, not just necessarily the duration, and the constant pattern, ideally.
Yes. So that's burnout. So then we have anxiety and depression, which you just mentioned, which is, there's been sort of a lot of comment recently in the UK around people being diagnosed. The medicalization of sort of life's difficulties, I suppose. And that's become more common. But talk me through that. What are the first signs? I guess sleeplessness is one, but when does someone move from just being a bit down to being anxious and depressed? And how do you recognize that?
Again, diagnosis help, and the psychiatric big books and all of that in a way just to make sense of things. But in the end, you just have to watch the symptoms and what the consequences are. So if it impacts your life, if it impacts your private life, if it impacts your performance, if you really start feeling unwell, you can tell. It happened to myself as well. So it's about paying attention really to yourself and your well-being.
So you've had personal experience of this?
Yeah. I've been in the clinic for a few weeks actually, and I thought it's burnout. I had a therapist at the time who said, you're burnt out, you should go to a clinic. In the end, the diagnosis was actually acute depression. And that's also because you can name it whatever you like. It's often it's kind of a mesh of different symptoms, and it doesn't really matter that much, at least initially. What is actually the diagnosis? Just when it's.
But if someone has acute depression, it's important they get medical support, isn't it?
Therapeutic support, at least. Professional support. Let's call it that.
Professional support. Yeah. I mean,
it's almost impossible, really. To once you reach a certain turning point, it's almost impossible to for that to just go away on its own, or for yourself, or just with help of friends and family to get out of it.
Yeah. One of my guests recently was here, and she said that she was beginning to get depressed. And she'd had this before and recognized it as such. And I wasn't feeling particularly qualified to support her, but I hope that she is now feeling better. I think she is, from what I've heard.
Glad to hear that.
So I think professional support. And then the self-medication thing. You mentioned that. I mean that's closely related to addiction, I'm guessing.
Addiction actually is, by definition, self-medication.
Oh, talk me through that. Because
addiction, so here's the thing. Addiction is often misconceived, or there's a misconception around it that it's, you take a drug, or if you take a drug too much, or if you drink too much alcohol, you will get addicted. That's almost never the case. It's when there is an underlying problem, either, a traumatization, or again, too much stress, or personality disorder, and that creates emotional pain. That pain is, when that reaches a level where it's not bearable anymore, it's natural for us human beings to try to evade that somehow, and self-medication. Now, be that with alcohol, be it prescription medication that is, legitimately prescribed by the GP or psychiatrist, or illicit drugs. And these are all ways to kind of, and their behaviors as well. Some people, I know.
So you're saying that the alcoholism is a consequence of the addiction?
Yeah.
I haven't described. I heard it described. It's a symptom.
It's a symptom.
Yeah, I stopped drinking a few years ago, and I'm probably more committed to my work now. So, I'm really sort of focusing on that. And I love
workaholism,
my work.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Workaholism. Yeah, and what's that about? But I feel that is that part of the entrepreneurial mind? This sort of focus, this sort of passion, or the sort of obsessive nature of an entrepreneurial mind.
I'm sure to a degree. Now, again, as I said before, we really have to focus on something is a problem when it becomes a problem. And honestly, that's true with also even the use of substances. It's true with how much we work, or whatever we do. We can draw tremendous pleasure and energy from working very, very, very hard. But if that starts impacting our relationships, if that starts impacting our physical well-being, and at some point also emotional well-being as a consequence, we just have to be aware of that. In itself, there's nothing wrong with, working nights and getting up at 3 a.m. with big ideas.
No, but it's sort of, it gives you pleasure. I mean, there's not a problem until it's a problem, but I mean, is there a sort of checklist of what makes something a problem? You mentioned relationships, what are the top, say, 3 things we should be looking out for that might say, hey, I've got a problem here?
Yeah. Often it's actually people around us recognizing it earlier, because once you're in the middle of it, you're in this drive and you're just trying to stay afloat, and it's hard to kind of, take a step back, like, okay, actually this is going downhill. This is not sustainable. I'm actually already having a problem.
So your family, for instance.
Yeah.
So they might. So what typically might happen?
So you have enough. Well, just ideally fostering an open dialogue with your family. So as an entrepreneur, you tend to already have specific family dynamic that others don't have. In terms of how much you're home, how much you work once you get home, yes. Being reachable around the clock, being stressed, etc. So ideally, you can foster an open dialogue around how you're perceived, and especially if things change and things change to the worse, because often entrepreneurs, especially when things get successful and you build more staff, before you have reliable middle management, all that, you do everything yourself, your relationships kind of fall away, and for some time your spouse or your family, they can hold that, but at some point it might just break away,
and then you notice it's gone.
Exacerbates the problem, right?
Yeah. So, but it's important to spot the problem before it becomes a bigger problem.
Early warning signs. Prevention is, in any health topic, physically as well as emotional, prevention is the best thing, obviously, right? Yeah. And then early detection, as it is with cancer or heart disease, the same with mental health. Early detection can prevent a lot of expensive and very painful fallout further down the line. Yeah. And then if that's kind of missed, still there is professional care out there that people should not be ashamed to access.
We're delighted that you're watching this episode. Please hit the subscribe button if you'd like to receive more insights and actionable advice that will help your business and or career.
So I don't know whether this is just a cliche. I'm interested in what you think, but it's been said that sort of entrepreneurs have often a certain personality type or traits, and that maybe they're helpful in some ways and a hindrance in others. Is that your view? Is that, and if so, what are they? What are the sort of traits you've recognized in your customers?
It's actually 100% my view.
100%.
Actually,
so come on, let's talk through that, because I'm really interested in this. What are the traits that
actually, a way back, I started my PhD in business with a focus on the emotional or psychological traits of, it was called deadbeat entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs that just keep on going even though they're not getting off the ground, and there's purely economically would be better off actually going back and getting a job.
Entrepreneurs.
That was my professor's idea. That was the working title. I never finished a PhD, right? But and that was way before I got into healthcare or mental health space. But already back then, it was recognized by some of the leading business schools.
People just wouldn't give up. They were
So there is obviously, I think that's clear to all of us. Entrepreneurs have certain traits. We call them increased risk appetite, or more risk taking than the average population. Hyper focus, kind of this stamina.
So risk taking, hyper focus when you won't sort of let something go.
Yeah, exactly.
I can see that.
And also, kind of certain resistance to criticism might be something that's associated with successful entrepreneurs, anyways. And because you need to kind of see your way through when everybody else is like, that's the wrong way to go. That also is related to thinking out of the box, certain creativity, and also daring to go and take another path than everybody else proposes or does. So that's all traits that are associated with entrepreneurship.
Some of those traits might be also associated with being a criminal. Have you ever been asked
Oh,
that?
no, 100%.
And they're pretty fine lines often. Huh?
Often it is. There's plenty of
entrepreneur, gangster. What's that? So,
lots of gangsters are very good entrepreneurs. There was a book that was proposed to me the other day, How to Run a Drug Cartel or something like that, which is purely based on economics. I haven't read it, so I don't endorse it.
This is going to get us banned by YouTube. Go on,
cut it out, edit it out. Right? But in the end, running a gangster empire is entrepreneurship as well, right? No, but it's true. So there is also in the entrepreneurial population, you will find a higher incidence of narcissistic traits, of psychopathic traits, also in criminals, as you say, but also higher incidence of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. So creativity, risk taking, hyper focus. These traits. Bipolar as well. Kind of in a manic phase, you can be immensely productive and motivate, and you can take others along. Charisma, leadership, again, often associated with narcissism. But the flip side of all of those traits, when they have a certain intensity, they're diagnosable, mental health conditions, and they lead to all sorts of problems. So in the population of addicts, you have I think 6 to 8 times the incidence of ADHD affected people in alcoholics, 6 times in cocaine addicted people, and I think 10 to 20 times the suicide rate in amongst CEOs. So that's the
CEOs have
side,
a very high suicide rate, do they?
So we have a research team that kind of whatever is publicly because it's not research enough, whatever is publicly available. We looked into from CEOs to Oscar winners to kind of all the things that success, wealth, fame. What's the mental health flip side of that? And the statistics are very, very clear. It's always multiples.
So these things that people set out because they're looking for, fame and fortune, come with a high price.
Another factor that's often not enough talked about, and it's not technically often not a mental health diagnosis in that sense, but you see that quite often in the entrepreneur business leader population. People have been neglected emotionally as kids, not shown enough love or appreciation by their parents or significant people in their lives. They kind of go out into the world to prove their worth to the world, but actually in the end to themselves, that they're worthy of something, and that can compared to a person who's equally well educated or equally intelligent, equally well equipped, with that additional stamina, that kind of almost ferocious drive to show that you're worth something, that can lead to tremendous success.
But also brings with it sort of vulnerabilities. You've really got something to prove, haven't you? Whether it's to yourself or your parents, and that's deeply psychological and powerful.
And the issue is that it's kind of chasing that carrot. No success, even if you make billions and you come from a modest background, that will not fill that void.
No, there's always someone who's more successful anyway.
Well, that's another thing.
So you're competitive, that's always a problem. What they call it, the bereavement of achievement. It's still the void is still there because you can't go back.
It's no substitute for kind of this nurturing your emotional. And you can. If you didn't receive that from your parents, you can build that through healthy relationships or. There's a phrase called reparenting, right? A therapeutic modality, kind of, be kind to yourself, talk to your inner child.
Interesting.
And kind of remedy that void. Yeah.
But listening to you makes me worried that entrepreneurs might repeat that with their own children, by becoming so sort of focused on building a business. Again, that's a sort of pattern that repeats. So I always think we're an entrepreneurial family. That might be why. I'm appalled by that thought, but it's perhaps...
many mental health issues, and particularly addiction as a symptom, but is kind of known to be a generational issue. So it's in a way handed down. And to addiction, there's a bit of genetic component, but most of it is behavioral. So it's about recognizing that and with intent breaking that pattern. I think that's a responsibility that we all have if you're from entrepreneurial wealthy families.
Talk me through this reparenting. You just said that. How do you do that? How do you reparent yourself?
So I'm not a qualified therapist. I can kind of talk you through all the details, but in the end, the notion is that that's one treatment philosophy or one treatment approach amongst many psychotherapeutic approaches. But there's a notion that we all carry an inner child, the one that's been anxious, that still makes us anxious, the one that was, neglected in our actual childhood, that's still kind of is hungry for attention or love. And then we go out and act out in all sorts of ways, and we don't realize why. So the idea is that this inner child, if we kind of focus our attention on that and its emotional needs and remedy that, so kind of reparenting, so be kind to ourselves. And there can be also, like in hypnotherapy, there can be these exercises, right, where you hold your young self and just kind and compassionate and show love and appreciation.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What gave you the idea to start a business like that?
So, as many good business ideas, I think it just happened by accident. So I was already entrepreneurially active at the time. I'd already founded some companies, some more or less successful, after I stepped out of a career as a management consultant. I always knew I would be an entrepreneur one day. And what actually happened was, so both my parents were in mental health care.
Right.
And it was a friend of probably a friend of the family. It was a top executive of a listed company who had developed an alcohol use disorder and couldn't go to any. So you need inpatient type care. It was at that escalation level. Couldn't go to any rehab or a clinic because the board and himself and everybody involved there were afraid the stock market price would just tank if that came out.
So he was a high profile person.
Yeah. So basically moved into the guest room at my parents' place.
Really?
And we organized, a butler, a chef, and an external psychiatrist. And my mom would do all the clinical coordination. And then we would already
amazing.
So you had some other therapists.
You helped solve this particular individual's problem as a family, and that was the beginning of your business.
Basically, we realized there is a need, there's a niche, right? So purely from an entrepreneurial perspective, it was like there was an opportunity. And because of confidentiality, I guess, was the main reason why there was space for this idea to emerge. And then based on that, obviously, if you treat only one client with whole team around it, you need to charge quite a price for that because the costs are tremendous. It makes sense
to add some other clients.
Well, at first it made sense to kind of look out of the box, as entrepreneurs do. What are the treatment modalities that normally are not offered in the mental health space, could add value, but are normally not part of it for cost reasons. So we were, as far as I'm aware, the first, or at least one of the first kind of mental health providers in the world that looked also into physical health, into functional health, gut health, hormone levels, and these type of gland functioning, because the digestive system, that all plays a role as well in in emotional resilience and well-being.
We haven't discussed that, of the physical health and what people can do to sort of sustain good mental health through physical activities or diet. Have you got some advice?
Well, the easiest one, stay fit, right? It's, you'll hear that often.
When you say stay fit, what if you're not fit to start with?
You have to make space to get fit then.
Right.
And that's true for anybody, not just for entrepreneurs or business leaders.
When you say fit, what do you mean?
Just, kind of the usual advice of 2.5 hours of cardio exercise a week, some resistance training ideally. And if you can't do that, at least, something is better than nothing. And that advice is true for everybody. The problem with business leaders, entrepreneurs, is often that's the first thing that goes when times get stressful. It's like, I have so much to do. I'm scheduled to go to the gym now, but actually I need to finish this meeting or make that call or that. So what do you cancel, right? It's family, it's it's workouts and all that. Then eat healthy, and with healthy, just again, caffeine, lots of sugar, these kind of things. That just that's normal. We all had this probably. It's I don't make assumptions about you, but during stressful
No, I
times,
like
an
coffee.
entrepreneur,
I've got one here.
that's what you start craving when your brain brain kind of needs that. So just watch that. So again, pragmatism. It's a problem when it becomes a problem. And
what I found works for me is I sort of make my exercise time before 8 in the morning, because no one really wants any of my time before 8 in the morning. So I go to the gym, I do yoga, or I do Pilates. But so 4 days a week, I'm doing something before 8 in the morning. And I really like that, because I think that's my time, between 6:30 and 8.
That's funny, because I used to think of myself as a kind of my exercise time was more like 4 or 5 p.m. But that would mean I would have to step out of the office, exercise, and go back to the office. And at some point, again, that just fell away. And I just could not train in the morning. I was like, I just didn't have the energy. I couldn't do it after breakfast. I would, feel nauseous. I couldn't do it before breakfast because I work at the hypoglycemic. But then I just trained I had no other choice. So I do the same thing. First thing, I get up in the morning, try to get at least half an hour, if not an hour of cardio in. And often that's enough if you do that several times a week. And you still have time for a coffee and breakfast after that before the phone calls.
Well, it sort of worked for me. It's kept me going all these years. And I actually really enjoy. I look forward to that time of day. I'll just be in bed or probably going to the office otherwise. So it seems to make sense to.
But you have to consciously make space for that, because there's plenty of excuses why in a busy schedule you can't make space.
And sometimes you have to travel and it doesn't work, but it's sort of important to try and come back to it, I think. I found in my own career that if I get overtired or I'm not exercising, that's when I start feeling a bit flat.
And it's often a vicious circle. You're already tired, like I can't exercise today, but actually the exercise would exactly be beneficial to kind of stop that.
So making time for sleep and time for exercise is really, I think, very important. And you're saying that's your experience.
100%. And then there's also, you can put that in the mental or the physical health space, somewhere in between. There's a reason why you hear more and more on podcasts and elsewhere that very high profile successful people, many of them talk about their own meditation practice. And some of them, put that into kind of entrepreneurial creative context. So I take this half an hour or hour a day strictly, because the big ideas, they come
do
when
you do that?
I'm struggling to establish one, but I'm working on it.
So they do half an hour meditation a day.
Yeah. So that's my aim. That's one of the things that for me kind of goes away first when things get too busy. So I don't want to, preach water and drink wine, as people say. No. But there is there's plenty of evidence.
Drink wine.
It's a German saying, maybe. I don't know.
That's a good one.
But there's very good reason that a lot of people who have been able to establish that they just rave about it. So it can be conducive to new ideas and creativity, but also on the mental health prevention side. So kind of 2 in 1.
Yeah, well, I like doing yoga, and there's an element of meditation around that. If you're a business leader, more and more, I think personal brand is becoming important because of the many media channels, social media, etc. And I hear that more and more. But if your personal brand is very public, it becomes more difficult, doesn't it? If you then become unwell in some of the ways that we've described, to seek support. It must be important that is very private. Is that a key part of your focus?
So as I mentioned, I think our first client and the kind of the idea started from more around confidentiality than actual clinical expertise. So
the confidentiality really came top. That was the first part of the You come
because
to
you can go anybody else.
Your confidentiality will be absolutely protected.
Exactly, and that's still the case. And we take tons of measures to protect the confidentiality of our clients. And I would agree that as investors in a public or private company, doesn't matter, or startup, as business partners or even as clients, you will look at how the leadership behaves, if they feel if it seems like they're in a good place or not good place, and if information becomes public that they're struggling emotionally, yes, there are risks to that, like the stock market price, for instance. But I also think, and I think we see evidence of that emerging with mental health conversation changing over the last few years, particularly since COVID, but also already a bit before. and also the dialogue, and also what we're doing here, the dialogue about the pressures on entrepreneurs and business leaders. I hope that we see in the very near future kind of a new leadership role evolving. People are more open and vulnerable and authentic, because in a way that's what we look for in leaders, right? We want somebody, yes, strong and who sees us through crisis, but we also want somebody relatable and empathetic. And if you own up to your own struggles and say, I need to take a step back, or this has been really hard for me, that I think overall makes a leader actually a better leader.
That's become sort of a question of some interest, though, hasn't it? To what extent would you follow someone who was very open about all sorts of weaknesses over someone who appeared to be pretty robust and say, hey, come with me, we're going to make a success of this?
So me personally, I'd rather invest, let's say, in a startup or in a company where a leader says, look, I know 1 weekend a month or 2 weekends a month, I just need with my family. I need that for my own well-being. Or I have been seeing a therapist, or I am seeing a therapist, or I need to take, a week or two off. I go to a retreat once a year. I'd rather have somebody like that than somebody who's like, I'm going strong, I'm in the office 24/7, we're going to double our revenues, and then suddenly they start displaying some erratic behavior in public, or they just disappear overnight.
Some of that becomes unbelievable, doesn't it? I get up at 4 every morning. So I think there's a sort of honesty element to this too. I mean, we're all human in the end.
And it's
we're not invincible.
That's the thing, and I think authenticity beats, it kind of beats a hiding of it's not weakness anymore, really. Obviously, to a degree, you have to stand up there. You have to kind of show confidence in what you're doing and be there as a strong leader. But I think we're getting into a time where that's not in a contradiction anymore with also showing your vulnerable side and just being open about certain struggles.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's something that we're still weighing up, though. As a society, how open is it wise to be?
No, 100%. So I'm seeing a trend that I'm hopeful about. But then, I mean, let's be honest. In the end, you have to be pragmatic about it, right? So particularly if a lot depends on the reputation of the leadership, if something emerges or even acutely happens, kind of in a mental health for them, it has to be very carefully managed. There has to be a good PR team, and also for the person themselves, there has to be privacy. You can't just kind of.
Are there any sort of public examples? I'm not asking you to sort of breach any confidence that you've observed where you've seen a business leader handle this well.
That's a very good question, actually. The thing is this. So in all transparency, I'm not following the news for more than 2 years now for mental health reasons. So that was my own kind of.
Oh, so you decided not to follow the news?
Yeah. So I don't know what happened in the last 2 years in terms of big stories.
This is so interesting. So you don't follow it. So you don't.
Yeah.
You're not obsessively looking at Twitter and seeing what's trending.
No.
And you made that decision as a business person and an entrepreneur for your own benefit.
Yeah.
Talk me through that. I mean, I want to understand that because I've heard other people say this, and you're just being dumped on sort of with negativity if you look at news.
That's exactly it. So, and you often.
So how's that going? I mean, is that?
Oh, it's going well. I don't notice it anymore. Right? Only when it comes up in conversations like, "Have you heard about what happened in Los Angeles?" And I was asked.
So you don't even look at the telly or anything?
No.
But you've got a phone.
Yeah.
But you don't have any of these apps.
No social. Well, the social media is only posting about mental health stuff,
right.
And I do have a team that supports me there, so I'm not exposed to a news feed all the time, and news sites and news apps and all that. And when I walk into an airport lounge and there's CNN on or something, then I try to look the other way.
So you're very strict about it.
Yeah.
So you see this as poison, basically.
It's well,
is that a fair word? No, but I mean, for
myself, yes.
Yeah.
Now. Actually, and I came across a few times from different people, also in podcasts and elsewhere. People talk about diet. We need to watch what you put into our body physically, but we need to equally have kind of an information diet, because I say poison. A lot of that information doesn't serve us.
It just creates anxiety. That's a brilliant idea. I really like it.
Yeah, be conscious about what you consume.
Diet. Yeah.
When you're in a certain industry, obviously you have to know certain parameters.
A lot of junk food at the moment on my information diet.
Or most of us, right? Yeah,
and it does. Yeah. It sort of winds you up. You sort of think, I look at sort of some of these things, and they make me angry.
angry or sad or anxious.
Thinking, why am I angry? Sad? I have no reason to be. I'm just on my way to do something. Why am I feeling like this?
Exactly. You nail it, and a lot of people don't realize that because it's an automatic process. We have our phones, we consume the news, and then suddenly we start feeling anxious or nervous or angry, and then we take that, I don't know, in a business negotiation or into a team meeting, and we kind of have that energy still with us. I just felt myself, it doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve my purpose, and also I stopped when I was actually acutely unwell because I realized
So this was part of your sort of issue.
Yeah. No, I just realized when I read about an innocent family dying on the motorway.
Why do you need to know that?
Why do I need to know that? But it makes me sad because I start thinking about the parents and whoever is affected and what if that happened to my family and all that. Pointless time and energy I could have used for something constructive or beautiful. So I stopped, and the first few weeks and months, I often found myself kind of putting in the URL into, I wouldn't have a news app. I always went through a browser and almost already loading the news site because just out of habit. And then I was like immediately like, okay, swipe away.
But one of the problems,
and now it's natural.
Okay, but one of the problems for us as business people is so much is sort of pervade through social media. I mean, we have brands that people want to learn about. We want to inform people about things. And it's quite hard, isn't it, just to sort of turn your back on that? And, I suppose we're putting this podcast out that will be on people's phones, and I hope they enjoy listening to what you have to say. But if they took a very strict view of what you've just said, they wouldn't ever hear that, would they?
No, actually,
but maybe
no, I don't agree.
Either.
No.
Or you don't
so
agree.
we have to differentiate there. So I listen to lots of podcasts.
Okay.
From podcasts such as yours for entrepreneurs and leaders, lots of mental health stuff, obviously lots of neuroscience, and then some geeky stuff. I'm also interested in like theoretical physics and all that.
But you don't look at the social feeds.
So that's the thing. I mean, obviously, at some point, my algorithm doesn't serve me stuff anymore. Anyways, that doesn't interest me, right? But there's a difference, I think. Also, so I got off news sites. That's the one thing. And then on socials, I deleted my personal social accounts, so I don't see actually what my friends are doing anymore and all that, because also it was just taking up too much time. But and these days with algorithms, and now with kind of AI emerging, you can say very particularly. So any kind of emerging research in psychiatry, I know about it, right? And if it makes big headlines or not, it just finds its way to me. So you're just asking
AI the questions. Tell me about anything.
You can tell, most of the news sites, even you can already put filters and all that. And now with AI, it's even easier. Just say, look, I'm interested in this, and that, and don't serve me anything else. Or serve me everything. So which sites are you saying this to?
Which sites do you say this to? Are you going through an AI app to do that, or are you just?
So me personally, just through my Google account, Google News, you can put, I only want to see this. And then I get alerts when there is something. And then when I see in the headline, this is something, it's kind of scandalous, so it doesn't serve me. I just
and have many of the people you've worked with, the entrepreneurs you serve, have they taken this idea from you, or are you pretty unique in this respect?
I like to think more and more. It does resonate with people, right?
Yeah.
Many say I can't do that because I need to know what's going on in the world.
Yes, that's my concern.
Yeah, and then I just say, look, I mean, you have to be pragmatic about it. To some degree, that's probably true. What I realized is all my peer group, from academia in the old days, now friends in various successful, many of them successful positions. When you meet them after work, you talk about the economy, about inflation or politics, or all that. That's that's kind of an intellectual dialogue, right? And then they just got used to that. I'm not participating in that because I can't. Right. And so automatically, when I meet people just one-to-one, that doesn't even come up anymore. When it's in a group, I'm
so
like,
what do you talk about?
I know. It's just about the mysteries of life and the universe, or mental well-being. I mean, that's what I talk
mysteries
about a lot.
Mysteries of life. Right? That's
or the last holiday, or how the kids are doing. Things that matter to me personally, and that.
So you're not following a football team. They talk about, because you couldn't even look up the results.
Well, you can look up the football team results with that. Well, you can get angry about them, right?
Yeah, quite. That's always annoying.
But if that's playful, why not? I mean,
quite.
And you can be angry and sad in life.
It is news, isn't it?
But it's not a tragedy in a sense that some of the things that happen out there, that knowing about it just makes me feel bad and doesn't help anybody.
So your practice, your business, is focusing on CEOs, entrepreneurs, highly wealthy people often, I imagine.
Right.
How did you start to build a brand that fit that space? You mentioned that you had one client who came to your family home, and you started. But how did you cater? How did you become? How did you create an awareness in that audience that you were there to help if they needed it? And what makes it particularly important for those type of people? You mentioned confidentiality. Are there other things that they look for?
I think the one keyword it all comes down to is trust. Right. I mean, trust in brands is valid in any important in any industry, but in mental health generally, and then specifically with this socio-demographic group, trust is the main thing. It's hard enough for anybody, no matter what your socioeconomic
but they don't know you at the beginning.
Sorry?
Well, they don't know you at the beginning, so it's hard to trust someone you don't know, isn't it?
Exactly, 100%. And it's hard enough for anybody who seeks therapy, right? To kind of entrust your vulnerable self to a stranger. So it's about building reputation. So basically the first few years were just, lots of meeting referrers, consultant psychiatrists, GPs, family office principals around the world, just being like, here we are, and you can trust us, and you have to take my word for it.
So you're also building a reputation in the network that works with.
That's the only way it works. That's the only way.
So you can't do it directly, obviously.
And then over time, then the reputation builds, and now we're quite well known actually in the family office space, and also a lot of entrepreneurs and top executives are in that space as well. That we are a trustworthy bunch of people to go to when you struggle.
And you get referrals, I guess, from people who've been. Yeah. Do people come back?
People do come back. I mean, the thing about the truth about mental health is it's, no matter how good or how expensive the treatment, that's no proxy for how the path goes afterwards. It's often quite entrenched, quite chronic. And that also there you have to be pragmatic about that. An improved quality of life is can be a good outcome. Try to stay on that trajectory, but there are bumps in the road. With addiction or not addiction, mental health is messy. Yeah,
sure. Mental health is messy. So this issue of trust, I support entirely. But you've got to build a team to deliver your service. How do you make sure you recruit trustworthy people?
I always proudly and very gratefully say that number one criteria to work at Paracelsus Recovery at our clinic is to have the heart in the right place. And then you need to have your diplomas and your
okay.
Your
so you have to have your heart in the right place. But how do you tell that when someone's sitting across the table from you at an interview?
Look, in the end, I mean, initially it came down to gut feel. Obviously, you meet the people a few times and you listen to them, and you just kind of. I'm quite a sensitive person, so I try to kind of also and ask certain questions as well. Find out what the motivations really are.
So, what sort of questions do you ask? This is important for all businesses. Yeah. None of us want to hire someone who's not trustworthy.
Yeah,
but you've made a business out of this.
Well, you're in recruiting, so I don't want to give you any tips about how to select your people, right?
Because I want to share them. But it's so important for you. I can see that that. The people you hire are trustworthy because you can't afford anyone to be sort of. I mean, one going question down the pub and blabbing about who's just signed up, or So,
exactly.
So, how do you make sure? Have you had problems with that?
Well, problems not. I mean, people come and go, and then when you realize it doesn't vibe.
So your gut feel's got a pretty good track record.
I would say so. But then, so one of the. If you ask, what do you ask them? One of the specific things, for instance. So for me, it's always a red flag when a therapist, no matter what his tenure or her reputation, tells me it doesn't make a difference for them who the patient is, who sits in front of them. They would treat George Clooney the same. They would just, John Doe walking in from the road. That's a red flag because you have to be very conscious of, there is in a therapeutic relationship, the patient knows that who he or she is or what they stand for or how wealthy they are or anything like that. And that has to be acknowledged and kind of built into that therapeutic dynamic.
So you're pretending to George Clooney, you have no idea who he is. Exactly. Well, that's dishonest, isn't it, for a start?
But we did, and a funny thing there, actually, we did have quite a famous Hollywood actress who I I think I was the only person who knew who she was before she came, because I had her on the phone. And we kind of agreed we wouldn't really tell the team that person is coming. But obviously then the therapist, I remember one of her psychotherapists in it who worked with her, just, walked into the treatment room with her and was like, okay, I am just watching a series where she was starring as the main character. And then we kind of made for a funny human moment. But in the end, it's about really just acknowledging that professionally, that there is something to that. And, people are starstruck to a certain degree, from very minimal pragmatic, there as a therapist should be, to, oh my God, but nobody's like, I don't care. It is, just. No,
there's a recognition. It's almost at some level like you think, well, I know that person. Even if you don't.
And that's another factor, actually, is that's very important, because often the role portrayed by a business leader or a celebrity, or it doesn't matter, somebody successful, is rarely how they perceive themselves or who they really are. They kind of devolve themselves with their quirks and kinks and anxieties and everything. So to give them the genuine feeling that they're really seen as a human being, that's a quality that doesn't come just because you're a qualified therapist. So that's also something to look out for.
So how long would obviously every situation, every person is different, but how long would someone typically stay with you for?
The average is about 6 weeks. Again, as you say, it depends on the condition and everything. But we also, we are very pragmatic. It's we did have actually business leaders to stay for a week or so, because they couldn't step out of their role for several weeks without risking their career or
of course,
stock market performance, all of that. And then even in 1 week, just to focus on stabilizing somebody, and then putting a kind of a structure in place. A therapist can travel back with them. They can come over for the weekends, or we can put it's possible. We've done that. Put a whole treatment team around somebody in their home or business environment.
So your clients come from all over the world, but they are coming to Zurich in Switzerland in the first instance.
Yeah, most clients come first to Zurich, and our clientele is globally mobile. It doesn't really matter.
Yes.
It's a flight away, right?
No, quite. And but the first week is so important, you're saying. But as a business leader, you can easily take a sabbatical for 4-6 weeks, and no one's going to notice.
Ideally you do. Well, I don't know. I guess it depends, right? It's if you're a professional CEO, it doesn't matter if you found a manager or professionally hired, right? Taking a few weeks absence, which seems untypical then, for you and your tenure, people start asking questions. And that's often an issue we face, because it's exponentially more sustainable for the outcomes and, for the healing process if somebody has 6 weeks versus even 4 weeks.
Really?
And exponentially more 4 weeks versus just a few days.
That's interesting. So you do need to invest the time in this to get.
And I cannot stress that enough to all our clients. And we have clients, say, I'm very intelligent. I can absorb more than the average person. Hit me with all the therapy. Hit me, 14 hours a day. It's not about that. It's it's the brain has to adjust. Lots happens in the subconscious. You have to kind of process things between therapy sessions, and also your whole physical system needs time to recover. There's no shortcut to that.
So 6 weeks is the advised start.
No, 6 weeks is good. Rarely people commit for 6 weeks up front, but it gives us so much more to work with than if it's 4 weeks or less.
So one of the things I want to ask you about is I went to a seminar a little while ago about psychedelics. I think you have a view on psychedelics.
I do have
as a potential treatment for anxiety and depression. Is that right?
Yeah.
What is your view? Yeah.
My view is, and I'm sure that's is shared by most people out there who are kind of following this space or in this space. I would say there's 100% certainty that in the next few years we see psychedelics as an important pillar in mental health treatment and psychiatry. It's been clearly established in research that it can be immensely powerful for certain conditions. More conditions are now being researched, like eating disorders, substance abuse. There's also already promising emerging research, so not just depression, anxiety disorders, and end-of-life research where it started with. And there's very little side effects to practically no risk if done properly. Don't do it at a rave, right? But within a therapeutic setting. So there's really.
But why is it
harm.
taking so long? Because I heard this before the pandemic, and we're now 5-6 years on, and you're still saying in the future. You said 100% likelihood, but it's taking so long. Why? What's the vested interests at work here?
It's well, you said vested interests. I think there's several reasons. One is politics is slow, and traditionally, I mean, when I went to school, it was like all drugs are bad, and psychedelics is equal to cocaine and heroin, and everything else that's bad out there. Cannabis back then was still kind of taught the same way. So it takes some time to change that. These substances were scheduled globally a while back.
But the way you're describing it would be in a medically sort of managed situation. It's not like go to parties and hit some.
Yeah,
you're talking about it being used to treat
exactly,
people who are
but
unwell.
there's a legal restriction.
There are plenty of drugs that are used to treat people who are unwell that would be illegal to use at a party.
Yeah, no, 100%. The problem is, so there is there's different schedule levels of substances, right? And a few decades back, psychedelics have been scheduled as no medical use and dangerous and highly addictive, which is all not true.
So
but
all
back
those
then,
things are untrue.
All those things are untrue.
Right.
But the legal framework is still there. And to change something so long, it takes time. And it takes lobbying, it takes research and all that. So that's one thing. And on the other side, and I'm also in that camp, there have to be, there's a camp that's of the view that there has to be enough established research and also protocols, how to use. So if you just know that, psilocybin, magic mushrooms, can be very effective for treatment of trauma or depression. But how to use it? You don't just give somebody magic mushrooms. Like, what's the dose? How do it several?
Sure.
Do you several times in which setting? Do you talk to them? Do they just listen to music? Preparation and integration are key. So there's plenty of research there now already, but these protocols are still kind of emerging. So that's why it takes time. But now, I mean, there's states in the US, there's Australia, there's different places in the world where the therapeutic use of psychedelics has been legalized.
Right. And how's it going in those places?
Well, the problem is when you legalize before you have kind of an infrastructure in place, and it's you need a kind of pharmacy where to get it from. You need a legal process, how to prescribe, where to order, and then you need to have the people trained. The therapists need to first do those trainings, right? So ideally, and that's what we do as well. So we work with ketamine, which is legal also in the UK and in many places in the world for certain mental health conditions, and which can be quite effective. It's not a classic psychedelic, but there's a lot of insights and trainings around that. So, and we already train our doctors and therapists in kind of psychedelic protocols. These trainings are now available, even though strictly it will be a few more years until it's fully legal to use these substances in
but you're quite
setting.
This must give you some optimism that there's advances that are on the horizon that can be made that will really help a lot of people.
I'm very optimistic about it, particularly also, I mean, the economics of healthcare generally, right? But mental health care particularly as well. There's not enough therapists, and it takes so much time to kind of help somebody through a mental health crisis or issue. Psychedelics have been kind of recognized as in many of these cases to act as a catalyst, kind of very conducive. You can achieve so much in such very little time. So that also will help the whole system is currently completely overloaded to just help more people.
I've heard, I don't know if it's the right way of describing it, but to use a computing analogy, they sort of help reboot the brain.
Yeah, brain plasticity. That's exactly what research currently thinks is one of the main aspects why it's so powerful. Yeah.
So I think just sort of coming back to where we began, I mean, I'm just thinking of our listeners, a lot of people who are in business, entrepreneurs, CEOs, they might be struggling with their mental health. I mean, we all have good days, we have bad days. I mean, the anxiety and depression is widespread in society, all ages and stages, it seems.
Oh yeah.
So what can you give some sort of tips that people can apply in their, I mean, we've discussed a few, but in their day-to-day lives that will help us, each and every one of us, manage the challenges of life.
Right. So it's particularly to the, let's say, business lead, entrepreneur, executive population, because I think there is more pressure that kind of leads to mental health issues, but also more pressure to hide it. So it's kind of double bind in a way. So particularly that population, I think really a crucial and helpful and important way to go about it is foster an open dialogue. You can start within your family, your relationships, but ideally also within the management structure. In a management meeting, it should, or in a board meeting with the top executives, it should become normal. Like, how have you been lately? How is your sleep? Right, all the way to where
you said a board meeting. How are you sleeping?
Yeah. Really? That because
I've never done that.
Well, give it a try. Tell me how it's going. Never done that. And people might first be like, okay, that's kind of private information, right?
Quite, yeah,
no, but I'm also an advocate that mental health of key personnel should be part of risk management frameworks of larger corporations, because that's often you can hedge your currency risk and your legal risks and everything. But if the top person just kind of crashes and burns,
completely right.
So from mandatory mental health checks to and so on. But
hang on, you just said mandatory mental health checks.
Yeah.
I mean, what's that involved? I've never heard this either.
I mean,
so you say to your team, you all have to go off and see. A doctor for a mental health
once
check.
every 6 months or once a year, that? You have to. There are some corporations
that do that. And how do people receive that?
Again, it depends how you contextualize it. It's like, I think you're all ill, it's, well, I don't trust you, and you have to talk to that therapist.
I introduce this to my team. But go on, talk me through this, because I've never heard this before either. Yeah. It's very interesting.
If you frame that as a win-win, which it is, it's obviously there's immense personal pain that can result from somebody becoming unwell. So, you will benefit yourself if you're kind of obliged to do occasionally see a therapist for a mental health check-in, so that there can be early detection. Now we are in.
You just remind me of the James Bond film. He kept failing his test. When he was sent off to be checked up by the. And then robustly returns to the fray. There's almost a stereotype about. Not doing that, isn't there? But you're saying it's a good thing.
No, that's actually very true. And some business leaders will struggle to open up, and
but wouldn't people worry that they might lose their job if they get a report coming back to the CEO saying this person?
It has to be set up properly and framed properly. So I have good friends working at one of the big companies that's been famous, internet companies that's been famous for making therapists or making therapists accessible for all their staff, but people don't access it apparently because they're somewhere your manager knows.
Well, that would be a worry, I think.
Exactly. So. But if the top person, the president of the board or CEO says, look, I'm doing it myself, and I want you all to do it as well. And, for this and those reasons, and also obviously ensure confidentiality around that. Anyhow, so we're talking now kind of, risk management, big structure.
Sure.
But generally, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business leader and, stress is part of your everyday life, and we talked about if you feel your sleep going in a certain direction, if you feel anxiety creeping in, brain foggy, sooner than later, rather than now, just either get a kind of therapeutic coach or even just see a proper psychotherapist, because that's likely then to just go downhill otherwise.
So you're advising seeing a psychotherapist to a lot of people would be helpful. Yeah.
And a lot of people are open about that.
Yeah,
there was a guy on LinkedIn the other day who I was like, I have my therapist has an observing board seat. Right. Like that's progressive.
Well, so the therapist comes to the board.
Yeah.
Right.
Can't vote, but can observe, right? But
that's interesting. Yeah.
I think that's the way to go.
Okay, that's very interesting. And what about if you're not an entrepreneur, but you feel very challenged at work? This problem with burnout potentially, or is there anything we might suggest that be helpful?
Prioritize self-care. And I think that's what most people affected are most afraid of, right? Is kind of take that time off or put your phone away once you step out of the office, because we live in a time where you feel, I don't know, if your manager should know that you've responded to the message even late night, but your career is not going to crash and burn if you put some boundaries. But it like much more likely will crash and burn if you don't, and if you just let that escalate.
So prioritize self-care. Yeah, and on this question of sort of getting mental health checks and encouraging people to do that, and you said it's a good idea to do it every 6 months. There is, I suspect, a fear among some people that they might be exposed in some way, and that might make put their job at risk. Is that something you can reassure us about?
Well, luckily in this country and in say most Western democracies anyways, there's a sound legal framework in place that you cannot lose your job over a mental health condition. But I understand that worry, because if your superior learns about that you might struggle with certain things, that when you're up for promotion versus somebody else who does not struggle with issues. But I think as we get more so A, it's not legal to discriminate on that part, and B, I think as we become more aware, also people in leadership positions, they would just not be inclined to see somebody as with less potential, to bring value to a company if they struggle with certain issues. I would actually go the other way and say in many areas of business, you actually want to select for certain issues like neurodivergence. In certain positions, I'd want people with ADHD more than somebody without, because these traits come with tremendous value as well. So it's not black and white. So I wouldn't worry about losing a job over it, and I would encourage everybody to.
But that's an important message for managers and entrepreneurs and people listening, that this is a really positive step, and you're not going to lose your job. So we've been talking a lot about mental health. I've heard this sort of expression, mental health. I worry sometimes it makes it sound like someone might be unwell. But I've heard the expression mental fitness as well. I mean, some of what you've been talking about in terms of getting support for the board, could that be positioned as mental fitness?
Absolutely.
Do you like that idea?
It's two sides of the same coin in a way, right? I mean,
it seems to me it's sort of more positively.
Yeah. I like that, and things sell better if they're framed positively, right? In the end, there's probably I see it this way. There's kind of a baseline, and things can go downhill from there, and then you can call that emotionally unwell or mental illness, or and if things go particularly well, or you have much more resilience, or you want to build that resilience, it's kind of up from that baseline. But it's the same thing.
So
it's also the same.
Fitter mentally.
It's the same tools. Building mental resilience is the same as preventing mental health fallout, mental health issues. It's the fitness, it's the meditation, it's the fostering healthy relationships, the prioritizing self-care, all that. It's the same thing, really.
Well, I think that's a good point on which to conclude, really. That so we can always get even better in our mental health and become fitter in a way through doing some of the things that you've kindly talked us through.
We can, and I would even go as far as we have to. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our families, we owe it to our employees, that we prioritize that.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you very much. I so enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks, James.
I'm going to ask you two more questions that I always ask,
which
are sort of signature questions for this podcast. The first is, and I think I know the answer, but what gets you up on a Monday morning?
Do you know the answer? If you say you know the answer.
Well, I think your passion for what you do. I don't want to put words into your mouth.
I'm a diehard pragmatist, right? So, my answer is it depends. Sometimes it's the coffee, and just because I have to. And passion helps, right? It's particularly as a business lead entrepreneur, but generally for any job or whatever you do, that Monday or that week, if you have a passion for it, it's light years difference, by magnitudes difference in terms of the effort it takes than if you feel you have to.
Yeah. And then the last question, Jan, is a question from my interview book. One of the 101 questions, which is asked of people a lot, is where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
I've absolutely no idea.
No idea.
I can answer that honestly because I'm not applying for a job, right? I still see myself, I think, in the mental health space. So no, I do have a vision, obviously, but I've had it.
No,
I'll tell you about that. But my life experience has showed me that you just have no clue where you are in 5 years, because things happen, opportunities come, crises come, and you just have to kind of navigate that.
I suppose it is your vision, in a sense, of where do you see yourself through that.
Exactly.
That I'm referring to. What is that?
That's alongside my passion. Is I think I can make a difference in fostering the mental health dialogue. And it kind of the niche of intersection of wealth, or significant wealth, and mental health, and entrepreneurship, and business leadership. That's where the dialogue is still, it needs a lot of fuel, and I think I can really make a difference there, which overall then feeds into, I think, the overall mental health awareness and kind of breaking through the stigma. There's still lots of work to do. That's my passion. So that gets me up Monday morning, and it's also where I see myself more in 5 years.
Very good. Thank you very much for coming all the way from Zurich to talk to me today. I've
Been a real pleasure, James. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah.